So this is the video I promised, just to give you a little bit of how you could fit the Visual Cortex RGB expander on your system. I will try to cover as much information as possible so you can make the decision if this is the right thing for you. The first thing I wanted to show you, all of you, is that is the size comparison against cadet fader. So one of the reasons I decided to design this model like that is to make it skip friendly. I really wanted to fit it on every LZX system if it's possible, regardless of the case or the depth of the case. So it's very slim, very skiff regarding on the depth of the module. It's actually just as a cadet about 4.5 centimeters, a little bit less than 4.5 centimeters of depth, and it basically has the three RGB outputs, the attenuators for each one of those outputs, and the Luma output. Basically how it works is that each output will be independent on the actual video that is encoded on the RGB outputs, which are the composite and component outputs of the visual cortex. So for instance, if you have only the red to the full positive side of this value, you will still have all the three channels available on the Visual Cortex composite and component outputs, but here on these three outputs you will only see the red one. So 12 o'clock is 0 gain, fully clockwise is 100% gain, maybe a little bit more, but more or less 100% gain. And then when you are counterclockwise, you're inverting the signal and it goes negative until 1 volt. So it will basically be inverted. So most of the time when you have the inverted signal, you want to add some positive offset on it if you are actually inverting it, or if you have an AC/DC input switch, then it will also work. The Luma output is completely independent of the value of these three RGB encoders, so if they are on 0, then you still get the Luma, and then you can colorize the three outputs regardless of any other thing happening on the Visual Cortex. This module has been built with these high quality ALPS potentiometers. They are not very cheap, but it makes sense and it's worth to building with them, just to make the model last a little bit more. You have 5 6172 high-speed op-amps, and then you just have the just like in cadets, the right angle mini jacks from Funk. This module has 2 input headers, one for the power, which is marked with -12 for the red stripe or the triangle on the markings on the cable. Then you have the actual header that is connected to the Visual Cortex that I will later on show you how to do all of that. It has some power diode, so if you connect these backwards, nothing happen to your module. Every integrated circuit has this coupling 100 nanofarad caps for removing any undecided noise. I've been testing this module even on a jig, and it works pretty well. I think it's ready, just let it go, and well, we will continue a little bit more on that. So, visual cortex, the brain of your system. This module is fantastic, and you should probably go and read the page 12 of your visual cortex, the page 12 of the technical manual, because there are a lot of information there for all these expansion headers that are on the back. So probably you read this manual back when you got it, and you just know this was probably extra information for you, but it would be nice to come back. So from all these expansions, we are interested on this one, which is the RGB expansion on the RGB expansion just right before the encoding into the composite and component outputs. So right before the video gets mixed on the two channels, you can use all the multiply and additive modes, colorization, the effects, even the mixing and the key everything is done that just right before everything goes into encoding to the composite and component outputs and S video. You get that exactly that signal on this header. So this header, I already soldered some small header, so I can test the expander. In order to solder that, you will need to remove these 4 screws. They are very small, so don't make sure you don't lose them. You just want to remove them carefully. Also, you probably want to discharge yourself from any electrostatic stuff you have in your body or in the place you are working, just so you don't destroy any of the sensitive components over here. After removing all those 4 screws, you wanna gently push out all these headers that are on the cortex. So I will just do it something like this. I will go over here and then do the same thing over here, and that's it. So once you have done that, you will have access to the back part of your cortex, where you should actually solder the header for the expansion. I don't know if it's this. Yeah, so just this is a very thick PCB, and it has a very high thermal shock, so that means you will probably need to apply a little bit more heat, but just be super careful and not burn any traces or layers over here. I will post if you really want to do this yourself and you have not soldered before, I will try to post the picture so you can see how this actually looks like. It should look shiny. Always the solder should look shiny, and it should be like not like a blob or like a sphere, but more like a small peak or a logarithmic ramp, mirror ramp from the cortex actually. So you usually have this shape which is like this. It should go right up to the pin. So there are some markings here on the PCB, so you will see the red, green and blue legends over the 3 pins, and then you have these row of pins which are ground pins, and you wanna you want to try to solder something that marks the red one. So in this case, I used these 3x2 dual pin header, and it has a small triangle marking which should actually match the cable I will be sending on the kit. And the reason for that is because you need to put it just in that position. So you just make sure you solder on the right one, because it matters how you actually put the cable. Otherwise, you will end up sending the ground to the RGB and the RGB from the ground of the other model, and you just will get black. I don't think everything will go bad on your Visual Cortex, but it's just everything will be black and it will not work. So just make sure that you solder the red mark on the PCB, which is a red channel, to the triangle, just like a power header, and which should match to the red cable, and it should go in like that, pretty much. So red is on this side. So after that, after you have soldered and clean up any excess of flux or any other stuff, you want to be super carefully to reassemble your Cortex. You just need to be sure that you get there are some headers on the middle, and those are well aligned. And when you think everything is aligned, just gently push it back together. Push it until it's fully sit down on the PCB, and that's it. This soldering cost me a little bit, because as I told you, I need to apply a lot of heat because of the thermal qualities of the PCB or how it was designed. So it was a little bit difficult, but just applying a little bit of extra heat, it was fine. So just be super careful with that, because remember, all these SMD are very sensible if you just apply too much heat, but otherwise you should be just fine with that. Other than that, once you have your Cortex assembled, yeah, so you wanna use the cable like that. So as I told you before, with the red marking, and then this should go to the red marking on the expansion on the module. So it should go just like that, and that's it. It should be ready to use on your system. So one of the things you need to notice is that your RGB expander will probably need sit just on the right of your Visual Cortex. That's because that's the closest path to the actual RGB encoder on the back of the Cortex. So Lars explained me that because all of this ribbon wire is actually unshielded, you can get noises if it's too long. So it will not be probably a good idea if you just run a really long cable around your system for that. So I'm gonna I just set it up like that, and it's right next to my Cortex to reduce any noise caused by this cable. It's probably fine if you daisy chain two expanders. You can actually daisy chain them and have two expanders. But anyway, so how I wanted to show you this thing works is I will just patch something into my cortex. So I will patch the horizontal and vertical ramp into the red, the horizontal minus vertical to the blue, and then I will just patch a vertical prismatic ray into the green. So now I have this composition. So as you can see, it's going straight into the output of this screen, so you can actually see what's going on. I'll just add some movement. There we go. So this screen will be showing the actual output from the cortex, from this composite output, and then on this screen I will be showing the composite output from the visual cortex. So what I will do is I will patch this RGB snake into the output expander. I will bring up the contrast a little bit from the memory palace, and then I have all the colorization right on the attenuators of the color. So it's not showing anything when it's fully counterclockwise because the net voltage is negative, and the memory palace will only understand 0 to 1 volt range signals. But probably on the rest of the signals where you have some attenuators, it will be just fine if you just invert the signal. So in this case, if I can bring out the different colors. Yeah, probably my hue is not the best one. So this is the red. I need to go past 12 o'clock. And you can actually have a little bit extra gain. So something like this, you are having probably 10% more gain than the actual 100% gain of the signal. But you can set it just to be the same as the original signal. Of course, there's some hue change on my memory palace. I will try to adjust that, but it is pretty accurate, and you can fiddle with all of this with no problems.